I saw the look in his eyes, cold and empty like a winter sky over Wyoming. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking right through her, at me. And in that second, I knew this wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about property. The air in the diner was thick enough to chew. It was a greasy soup of burnt coffee, old bacon, and the faint, sweet perfume of pine sol fighting a losing battle against decades of road grime. It was 2 in the morning at AT/A off I-80 in Nebraska, a place where time goes to die. The fluorescent lights hummed a tired, electric tune, making everything look a little green and sickly, like a photograph left out in the sun too long. I was hunched over the counter, nursing my third cup of coffee, which tasted more like hot, brown water with an attitude. My rig, the old Freightliner Cascadia, was parked out back, its engine ticking as it cooled under a blanket of stars so bright and sharp they looked like chips of ice. I'd been pushing hard since Denver, trying to outrun a memory of a sunset over the Rockies that felt too much like an ending. The sky had been bruised purple and orange, and it reminded me of another sunset, in another state, with a woman whose name I still had trouble saying out loud. Brenda, the waitress, slid my cup back across the counter, refilling it without asking. She moved with an economy of motion that only comes from 30 years of slinging hash in places like this. Her hair was a brassy blonde beehive that defied gravity and fashion, and the snarling panther tattooed on her forearm seemed to flex every time she topped off a coffee. "You're gonna float away, Sam," she said, her voice a gravel road. "Or your heart's gonna punch its way out of your chest. What's the hurry?" "Got a deadline in Portland," I lied. The deadline was flexible. The truth was, I just didn't want to stop. When you stop, the quiet gets loud. "Portland," she snorted, wiping the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "Rain and sad music. You'll fit right in." She looked me over, her eyes missing nothing. "You look like hell warmed over. You sleep at all?" "Slept an hour outside of Sterling." "That's enough. For a teenager, maybe. A man your age needs his beauty rest." She winked, a gesture that crinkled her whole face. Brenda had a heart of gold, buried under layers of sarcasm and cigarette smoke. She knew most of the regulars by name and trouble. I was about to come back with some smart remark when the bell over the door chimed, a tinny, cheerful sound that was completely out of place. That's when she walked in. And the whole greasy, humming world of the diner just sort of tilted. She didn't belong. You can tell right away. It's a language you learn on the road. Most folks who stumble into a place like this at this hour are either truckers like me, worn smooth by the miles, or lot lizards with eyes that have seen too much, or families on vacation who took a wrong turn into reality. She was none of those. She was maybe 30, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail that had started to fray around the edges, like she'd been running her hands through it all day. She wore clean jeans, the expensive kind, and a simple gray sweater that looked soft. Too soft for a place like this. She carried a single, expensive-looking duffel bag, the kind you see in airport terminals, not truck stop parking lots. But it was her eyes that got me. They were blue, the color of a deep lake, but they were scanning the room like a cornered animal looking for an escape route, cataloging the exits, the faces, the potential threats. She moved with a kind of deliberate quiet, her shoulders hunched slightly, like she was trying not to take up any space at all, trying to be invisible. She slid onto a stool 2 down from me, putting her bag on the floor between her feet, holding the strap like she was afraid someone might snatch it. Brenda, who'd seen her share of runaways and women in trouble, softened immediately. Her whole posture changed. "Coffee, hon?" Brenda asked, her voice losing some of its gravel. The woman just nodded, her gaze fixed on the countertop as if the swirling patterns in the formica held all the secrets of the universe. When Brenda set the mug down, the woman's hand trembled just a little as she reached for it. She didn't touch the sugar or the cream. Just held the warm mug in both hands like it was a lifeline, leaching its heat into her cold skin. I'm not the kind of guy who strikes up conversations. 20 years of this life teaches you to appreciate the silence. The cab of a truck is a lonely place, but it's an honest lonely. A diner counter is different. It's a shared loneliness, and sometimes that's worse, a room full of people all alone together. But I kept finding my eyes drifting over to her. She looked like a ghost, like she'd just stepped out of a life that no longer existed and wasn't sure where to go next. She had the look of someone who'd packed in a hurry, grabbing only the things that mattered and a whole lot of fear. After about 10 minutes of her just staring into her coffee, I heard her take a quiet, shaky breath. It was the sound of a dam about to break. I figured, what the hell? Brenda was busy with a table of college kids who'd ordered one plate of fries to split 4 ways. It was up to me. Long night? I said, my voice sounding rougher than I intended. She jumped a little, startled out of whatever dark place her mind had gone. Her head snapped up and she looked at me. Really looked at me. For a second, I saw raw panic in her eyes, a flicker of a doe in the headlights. Then it smoothed over, replaced by a polite, practiced mask. The kind of mask people wear when they don't want you to see the damage underneath. You could say that, she said. Her voice was soft, educated. It had a cadence that didn't belong to Nebraska. East Coast, maybe. Road'll do that to you, I offered, taking a sip of my own terrible coffee. Keeps you honest. Where you headed? It was a standard truck stop question. Benign. But for her, it seemed to carry the weight of a federal interrogation. She hesitated, chewing on her lower lip, her eyes darting toward the plate glass window and the dark parking lot beyond. She was weighing what to say, what lie would be the most believable. Oregon, she finally said. To see my sister. That's a long haul from, wherever you're from. I was fishing, gently. Virginia, she supplied. It is. We sat in silence again. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. I've seen that look before. It's the look of someone whose plan, whatever it was, has just fallen apart spectacularly. I was about to turn back to my coffee and leave her be, mind my own business like I usually do, when she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. You're a truck driver. It wasn't a question. She was looking past me, out the big plate glass window at the rows of sleeping giants in the lot. My Freightliner was among them. Guilty as charged, I said. 2 million miles and counting. Seen every sunrise and sunset this country has to offer, and most of what's in between. She turned back to me, and that polite mask was gone again. What was underneath was just pure, uncut desperation. It was a look I recognized. It was a look I'd seen in the mirror a time or two. Are you heading west? I've been asked for rides before. Plenty of times. It's part of the landscape. Usually it's some kid with a backpack and a head full of Kerouac, thinking the road is poetry. Or some down-on-his-luck fella trying to get to a job 2 states over. 99% of the time, the answer is no. Insurance, regulations, company policy, those are the easy excuses. The real reason is that you let a stranger in your cab, you're letting their whole world of trouble in with you. And my cab's only got room for one man's troubles. It's crowded enough as it is. I'm headed to Portland, I said, matter of fact. Got a load of machine parts for the port. Gotta be there by Friday. The relief that washed over her face was staggering. It was like watching a dam burst. Her shoulders slumped, the tension draining out of her in a visible wave. Oh, thank God, she breathed, and her eyes welled up. She blinked the tears back, fast, refusing to let them fall. Would you be willing to take a passenger? I can pay you. I have money. She started to fumble with her bag. It's not about the money, I said, maybe a little too gently. I looked her over again. The clean clothes, the nice bag, the terror in her eyes. This wasn't a runaway teenager. This was a woman. A woman running from something serious. My bus, she said, the words tumbling out now, anxious to fill the space with a plausible story. It was supposed to be here an hour ago. They just announced it's been cancelled. Mechanical failure. The next one isn't until tomorrow afternoon. I can't stay here that long. What's the hurry? I asked, keeping my voice level, trying to sound casual. She looked down at her hands, which were now clenched around her coffee mug so tight her knuckles were white. My husband, he's in the military. He's deployed. Afghanistan. It's just hard, being in the house alone. My sister, in Portland, she's been begging me to come stay with her until he's back. I need to get there. It was a good story. A neat story. It explained everything. Almost. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her movements jerky, and swiped through it, then pushed it across the counter to me. It was a picture of her and a man in an army dress uniform. He was handsome, square-jawed, with a smile that looked like it was carved from stone. They were standing in front of a neatly manicured lawn, an American flag flying from the porch. The perfect American couple from a magazine ad. Something about the photo felt wrong. Staged. Too perfect. It reminded me of the photos my ex-wife Karen and I used to take at Christmas, smiling for her mother's camera while just an hour before we'd been screaming at each other in the kitchen, the air thick with things we could never take back. People build entire lives out of photographs that lie. He's a captain, she said, a note of pride in her voice that sounded rehearsed, like a line she'd said 100 times. He's a good man. A hero. I slid the phone back to her. I've met heroes. I've met men who've seen things that would turn your soul to dust. Some of them were quiet, and some of them were loud, but none of them looked quite as polished as the guy in that picture. Heroes are usually a little frayed around the edges, just like her ponytail. Look, lady, I started, ready to give her the polite no. My gut was screaming at me. This had bad news written all over it. Sarah, she said quickly. My name is Sarah. Sarah, I repeated. The name hung in the air. It's against company policy. It's a big risk. My dispatcher finds out, I'm fired. No questions asked. Please, she whispered. The word was so full of raw need it hit me right in the chest. It wasn't a request, it was a prayer. I won't be any trouble. I'll be quiet. You won't even know I'm there. I just can't stay here. Please. I looked at her. I saw the fear she was trying so hard to hide. I saw the bone-deep exhaustion. And maybe I saw a little bit of myself in her. Not the running part, but the loneliness. The feeling of being untethered in the middle of this huge, indifferent country, with nowhere to go that feels like home. I thought about the folded, creased photograph I keep tucked in the back of my logbook. The one of the woman from Montana, the one with eyes that held a whole universe of unspoken sadness and a smile that didn't quite reach them. I'd wanted to save her, too. I'd met her in a blizzard, stranded just like this. I'd wanted to pull her out of her life and put her in mine, but that's not how it works. You can't save people. You can only give them a ride. Sometimes, that's enough. Maybe this was a second chance to do the thing I hadn't done then. All right, I sighed, the word tasting like defeat and surrender. My common sense was kicking and screaming. All right, Sarah. I'm pulling out in 20 minutes. You get whatever you need. One bag. That's it. Her face crumbled, this time with a gratitude so profound it was almost painful to watch. Thank you, she said, the tears finally winning, tracing clean paths down her dusty cheeks. God, thank you. Don't thank God. Thank my weak character, I grumbled, pushing my empty mug away. I threw a 10 on the counter. And buy your own damn coffee from now on. I'm a trucker, not a charity. She laughed, a real, genuine laugh that was like a splash of clean water in that grimy diner. For a second, I saw the woman she must have been before the fear set in. It was a nice laugh. I told myself it was a mistake. I knew, deep in my bones, that it was a mistake. But as I paid my tab and headed for the door, with her trailing behind me like a shadow, I knew I was going to do it anyway. Some mistakes you just have to see through to the end. The first few hours were quiet. The sun started to bleed over the horizon, a slow miracle painting the flat Nebraska plains in shades of orange and purple. It's my favorite time of day, that fragile moment between the last of the night and the first of the morning. The world feels new, like it's holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of day it's going to be. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her duffel bag clutched at her feet. She'd barely said a word since we climbed into the cab. The space, my space, felt charged, full of everything she wasn't saying. The cab of a truck is a confessional for some, a tomb for others. I wasn't sure which one this would be. I kept the radio low, some classic country station out of Cheyenne. Johnny Cash was singing about a boy named Sue. It felt appropriate. Life hands you a bad hand, you learn to play it tough. You comfortable? I asked, finally breaking the silence. The engine's drone was starting to feel like an accusation. She nodded, not looking at me. It's bigger than I imagined. She's home, I said, patting the worn dashboard. Got everything I need right here. Bed, fridge, microwave. Logbook full of lies and a CB full of fools. More reliable than most people I know. She gave me a small, fleeting smile. What's her name? Doesn't have one, I said. She's a machine. A good one. Almost 2 million miles on her and the engines never quit on me. Naming her just complicates things. You start thinking of it as a partner instead of a tool. Gets messy. I glanced at her. Like people. That seemed to shut her down again. She went back to watching the landscape roll by, the telephone poles flicking past like a metronome counting out the miles. I let her be. I figured she had her reasons for being quiet. People who are running are usually running from words as much as anything else. The words they said, the words they didn't say, the words that were said to them. We drove through the rest of the morning, crossing the invisible line into Wyoming. The landscape started to change, the flat, predictable plains giving way to rolling hills and the distant, hazy promise of mountains. The sky got bigger, wider. Emptier. It's a beautiful and terrible state, Wyoming. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel like you could disappear and no one would ever find you. I figured that was either a comfort to her or her greatest fear. To try and fill the heavy silence, I started talking. I told her about the road. About the time my brakes went out coming down the grapevine in California, the smell of burning metal and the sheer terror of being in a runaway 80,000-pound missile. About my friend, Jimmy, who drove a blue Peterbilt and knew the best barbecue joint in every state. The one who went out for a load of lumber to Seattle 10 years ago and just vanished. Truck, trailer, everything. Gone. Like the road just swallowed him whole. His wife waited for a year, then 2. Eventually she sold their house and moved away. The road gives, and the road takes. Jimmy taught me that. I don't know why I told her that story. I don't talk about Jimmy to anyone. It's a private grief. But looking at her, at the way she kept glancing at her phone like it was a snake, the way she flinched every time a car passed us a little too fast, I felt like she'd understand. The world is full of people who disappear. Some just do it slower than others. I told her about the blizzard in Montana, years ago. How I-90 shut down for 3 days. A whole line of us, maybe 20 trucks, stranded in the middle of nowhere. Cold like you wouldn't believe. But we pooled our food. One guy had a whole shipment of sausages. Another had bread. We built a fire in a drum barrel. We told stories, lies, sang songs. For 3 days, we were a town. A frozen, diesel-powered town. That was where I'd met her. The woman in the photograph. Her car had slid into a ditch. She was a painter, heading to a gallery show in Bozeman. We shared coffee and conversation for 3 days. I never even learned her last name. When the plows came through, she drove off, and I was left with a memory and a sketch she'd drawn of me on a napkin. I still have it, tucked inside the photo. She listened, her eyes fixed on my face. For the first time, she seemed to be seeing me, Sam McCarty, and not just a means of escape. "You've been doing this a long time," she said softly, when I'd finished. Since I was 22. Fresh out of a bad job in an Oklahoma oil field and a worse idea about what my life was supposed to be. Thought the road was freedom. Turns out it's just a different kind of cage. One with better scenery. Were you ever married? The question was direct, out of the blue. It caught me off guard. Once, I said. My hand instinctively went to my jaw, tracing the faint, jagged line of a scar that disappeared into my stubble. A souvenir from a bar in Odessa, Texas, the night I got a phone call that my marriage was well and truly over. Didn't take. We were two different people pulling in two different directions. The rope snapped. I'm sorry. Don't be, I grunted. Some things are better off in the rearview mirror. You can't spend your whole life looking back. You'll crash. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the sagebrush blur past. What if looking back is all you have? Then you're in trouble, I said, more gently than I intended. Around noon, I pulled into a rest stop, a lonely patch of asphalt with a sad-looking brick building and a few picnic tables. Gotta check the tires, stretch my legs, I announced. As I did, I scanned the parking lot. And there it was. A blue Ford sedan, parked over by the car section. The same model, same color as one I'd vaguely noticed leaving the T/a back in Nebraska. My trucker's brain, the part that's always cataloging cars, plates, and patterns, flagged it. Twice is a coincidence. 3 times is enemy action, Jimmy used to say. This was twice. My gut tightened. You need anything? I asked Sarah. I'm fine, she said, but she didn't move. She just sat there, looking smaller in the big passenger seat. I did my walk around, thumping the tires with my bar, checking the seals on the trailer. It was a routine I could do in my sleep. As I came back around to the front of the cab, I saw her on the phone. Her back was to me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was hunched over, trying to shield the call. Her voice was low, urgent. I couldn't make out the words, just the panicked rhythm of them. Then she hung up, and when she turned around, her face was chalk white. She saw me and tried to force a smile. It was a pathetic attempt, a cracked and broken thing. Everything all right? I asked, leaning against the grill. The engine was ticking as it cooled. The blue Ford was still there. Fine, she said, too quickly. Just, my sister. Checking in. She's worried. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. When you call your sister to check in, you don't look like you've just seen a ghost. But it wasn't my business. That's what I told myself. I was just the driver. I was paid in a cup of coffee and a sad story. All right then, I said, climbing back up into the cab. Let's burn some daylight. As I pulled out of the rest stop, I checked my mirrors. A minute later, the blue Ford pulled out too, staying a few car lengths behind us. It wasn't a coincidence anymore. The atmosphere in the truck had changed. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, thick with her fear. I could almost smell it, a sharp, metallic scent underneath the familiar smell of diesel and stale coffee. She kept glancing at her phone, which she now held in a white-knuckled grip. An hour later, it rang. It was a different ringtone, a loud, obnoxious pop song that shattered the tense silence. She fumbled for it, her face a mask of pure terror. And stabbed the ignore button so hard I thought she might break the screen. She immediately powered the phone off and shoved it deep into her duffel bag as if it were a live grenade. That was it. I'd had enough. I flipped on my turn signal and muscled the big rig onto the shoulder of the highway, the tires kicking up gravel. The sudden stop made her gasp. I pulled the air brake, and the hiss of it was the only sound. Who was that? I asked, my voice flat. The pretense was over. The blue Ford had slowed down with us, pulling over about a quarter-mile back. No one, she whispered, her eyes wide, pleading with me to believe her. A wrong number. Sarah, I said, and her name was an accusation. I turned in my seat to face her fully. That blue Ford sedan back there has been on our tail since Nebraska. You've had 2 phone calls that have sent you into a panic. The story about the deployed husband is falling apart. Now, I can be a patient man. But I don't like being a stupid one. Who's looking for you? She started to cry. Not loud, just silent, hopeless tears that tracked down her cheeks. She looked utterly broken. You don't understand, she sobbed. Then make me understand, I said, my voice hard but not unkind. Because right now, you're not just a passenger. You're trouble. And you've brought it into my truck, my home. That man in the Ford is hunting you, and that makes him my problem too. I need to know what kind of trouble we're dealing with. She took a long, shuddering breath, looking in the side mirror at the distant car. It's my husband. I thought he was in Afghanistan. The words hung in the air between us, cold and sharp. That's the story, she said, her voice hollow. It's the story I tell everyone. It's easier. Easier than what? She looked out the window at the endless sagebrush, as if the answer was out there. Easier than the truth. He's not deployed, Sam. He's home. He was supposed to be on a training exercise in California for a month. I had it all planned. I packed my bag, I bought the bus ticket. I thought I had a head start. But he must have found out. He must have come home early. The whole story clicked into place, a greasy, ugly picture. The perfect photo, the rehearsed pride, the desperate need to get away. It was never about visiting her sister. It was about disappearing. Why are you running from him, Sarah? I asked, my voice softer now. Because I'm afraid of him, she whispered. When he's home, it's not like the picture. He's not a hero. He's angry. All the time. Over nothing. The way I load the dishwasher, the friends I talk to on the phone. And he's so controlling. He checks my phone, my emails, the mileage on my car. The last few months, it's gotten worse. He has this temper. It's like a switch flips. And his eyes get empty. My blood ran cold. I'd seen that look. I'd seen it on men in bars right before they threw a punch. I'd seen it on a state trooper in Arizona who was enjoying his job a little too much. It was the look of a man who'd lost his humanity. He's hit you, I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. She just pulled the sleeve of her soft gray sweater up her forearm. There, on her upper arm, was a constellation of fading bruises in shades of yellow and purple, in the distinct and unmistakable shape of a handprint where he'd gripped her. I felt a surge of cold, hard rage. It started in my gut and spread through my whole body, hot and clean. I hate a lot of things in this world. Liars, four-wheelers who cut you off without signaling, lukewarm coffee. But there is nothing on God's green earth I hate more than a man who uses his strength to hurt a woman. It's the oldest, ugliest sin there is. The image of the bruises superimposed itself over a memory, sharp and unwelcome. My own father, a quiet man mostly, but with a darkness in him that would come out after a few beers. I remembered the sound of my mother crying in their bedroom, the careful way she'd wear long sleeves in the hot Oklahoma summer. I remembered the one time I tried to step in, a scrawny 15-year-old, and the back of his hand had sent me sprawling, the taste of blood in my mouth. My brother had handled it differently, a few years later. That was a memory I kept locked away, in a part of my mind marked, "Do not enter." But the rage was the same. The feeling of helpless fury. And it reminded me of that night in Odessa. The night my marriage ended. I'd gotten a call from a friend telling me where Karen was. I'd found her in a smoky bar with a slick oilman, his hand on her knee. I didn't see her. I just saw him. I saw the lie. The rage was a white-hot flash. There were words, a shove, and then he broke a beer bottle on the bar and came at me. I got the scar on my jaw, and he got a trip to the emergency room. The divorce papers were filed a week later. I wasn't proud of it. That rage was a beast inside me, and I'd spent years keeping it chained. Looking at Sarah's arm, I could feel the chain rattling. Okay, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I let out a slow breath, forcing the beast back down. Okay. This changes things. I'm so sorry, Sarah wept, fresh tears falling. I shouldn't have involved you. I was just so scared. It's done now, I said, my eyes on the mirror. The blue Ford was still there, waiting patiently. He's following us. We need a new plan. Portland is out. He'll expect you to go to your sister's. That's the first place he'll look. We need to get you somewhere he won't think to look. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway, my mind racing faster than the engine. The setting sun threw long shadows across the road. The beauty of it was lost on me. All I could see was the road ahead and the road behind, and the danger that was closing in on us from both directions. The cab of my truck, my home, my sanctuary, had become a cage. And we were rattling down the highway with a monster on our tail. We needed to stop. I'd been pushing for 16 hours straight, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. The lines on the road were starting to blur together and my eyes felt like they were full of sand. Night had fallen completely over Wyoming, a black, starless blanket that swallowed the horizon. We were somewhere between Rawlins and Rock Springs, a stretch of I-80 so desolate it feels like you're driving on the surface of the moon. The blue Ford was still with us, hanging back a half-mile, a persistent ghost in my mirrors. We need to get off the interstate, I said, my voice low. He'll be watching the big truck stops, the T/as, the Petros. He's expecting us to stop for fuel or food. We need to find some little two-bit motel, somewhere off the beaten path. Sarah was huddled in her seat, her arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't said much since her confession. The truth was out, and it had sucked all the air out of the cab. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice small, the voice of someone who has given up making her own decisions. We're gonna get a few hours of sleep, I said, my mind already working the angles. Then we're gonna figure out how to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't find you. My mind was racing. A shelter? A different bus station in a different city? Every plan had a hole in it. A man like that, a military captain trained in tactics, he wouldn't just give up. He was hunting. And he was patient. We had to break the pattern. I took the next exit, a lonely ramp that led to a dark two-lane state highway. A single, bullet-pocked sign promised gas-food lodging. It was probably a lie, or at least an exaggeration, but it was our only option. I killed my headlights for a moment as I turned, hoping he'd overshoot the exit. A long shot. We followed the narrow road for about 5 miles, the truck bouncing on the uneven asphalt, until we saw it, a flickering neon sign that said, The Drifter Motel. Half the letters were burnt out, so it just said, TED if or MOL. Below it, the NO vacancy sign was dark. It was perfect. A dozen rooms in a low L shape, a gravel parking lot full of weeds, and an office with a single yellow light on. It looked like the kind of place people went to when they didn't want to be found. I pulled the rig around back, out of direct sight from the highway, parking it in the shadows alongside a couple of rusted-out pickup trucks. The big truck would still be visible to anyone who came looking, but it was a risk I had to take. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me, I ordered. My voice was clipped, military-like. Ironic. I grabbed my jacket and slid out of the cab, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. The office was a small, stuffy room that smelled of stale cigar smoke, cheap whiskey, and regret. An old man with a face like a crumpled paper bag sat behind a scarred wooden counter, watching a tiny black and white TV. A wrestling match was on. He didn't look up when I came in. Need a room, I said. $40. Cash, he rasped, his eyes still glued to the screen where 2 large men were pretending to hurt each other. I need 2 rooms, I said. Adjoining, if you got M. He finally tore his eyes from the television and looked at me. A flicker of something, curiosity, maybe, or just professional assessment, passed through his cloudy eyes. He took in my road-worn clothes, my tired face. He slid 2 keys, actual metal keys on cheap plastic fobs, across the counter. Rooms 7 and 8. Thanks, I said, laying 2 $20 bills and a 50 on the counter. He glanced at the extra 50, then back at me, his expression unchanging. Lady friend in some kinda trouble? Just want a quiet night, I said, my voice flat, leaving no room for discussion. He shrugged, a small movement of his bony shoulders, and swept the money into a drawer. Ain't my business. Rules of the house are simple. No loud parties. No pets. And no killin' nobody. The paperwork's a nightmare. He turned back to his wrestling match. I went back to the truck. Sarah had her face pressed against the passenger window, her expression terrified. I gave her a quick nod and she unlocked the door. I got us 2 rooms, I said quietly. 7 and 8. They connect. You take one, I'll take the other. We leave the connecting door unlocked. You hear anything at all, you make a noise, you come into my room. Got it? She nodded, grabbing her bag. We walked across the gravel, the crunching sound unnaturally loud in the dead silence. The rooms were what you'd expect for $40 and a $50 tip for silence. Threadbare carpet stained with history, a bed that sagged in the middle, and a single, fly-specked light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air was cold and musty, the smell of 1,000 lonely nights. But it was 4 walls and a locked door. I put her in room 8, the one further from the parking lot. I checked the flimsy lock on the window, then opened the connecting door to my room, number 7. Get some sleep, I told her. I'll keep watch for a while. Sam, she said, her hand on my arm. Her touch was light, but it sent a jolt through me, a current of warmth in the cold room. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said gruffly, pulling away. We're not out of this. Just get some rest. I left her and went into my room, leaving the connecting door ajar just enough to hear. I didn't turn on the light. I pulled the one rickety chair over to the window, positioning it in the deep shadow of the curtain so I could see the entrance to the parking lot without being seen. I sat there in the dark, the cold vinyl of the chair sticking to my back, and I watched. The minutes crawled by, turning into an hour, then 2. The only sounds were the distant, mournful hum of the interstate and the frantic beating of my own heart. I drank the last of my cold coffee from my thermos. Every pair of headlights that swept past on the highway made my gut clench. My mind started to drift. This was the part of the job nobody saw. Not the open road, not the freedom. The waiting. The watching. The long, dark hours spent in a cheap room, alone with your thoughts. And my thoughts, as they always did in the quiet hours, drifted to the past. To the faces and places that littered my 2 million miles. I pulled my wallet out, and from a worn flap in the back, I took out the folded, creased photograph. I unfolded it carefully. It was the woman from the Montana blizzard. The painter. In the faint moonlight filtering through the dirty window, I could just make out her face. She was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone trying to convince herself she was happy. Her eyes told the real story. I'd wanted to ask her what was wrong. I'd wanted to tell her to get in my truck, that I'd take her anywhere she wanted to go. But I didn't. I was younger then, more afraid of getting involved. I'd let her drive away in her snow-covered car, and I'd kicked myself for it every day for a month, and on lonely nights ever since. Maybe helping Sarah was a way of paying off that old debt. Atoning for a silence I regretted. I was so lost in the memory that I almost missed it. A car turned into the lot. Slowly. No headlights. It coasted to a stop near the office, in the darkest part of the lot, half hidden by a sprawling juniper bush. It was a blue Ford sedan. My heart hammered against my ribs. He'd found us. He must have seen me take the exit and just waited, patiently, knowing we had to stop somewhere. I stood up, my joints cracking. My first instinct was to burst into Sarah's room, grab her, and run. But where? He was blocking the only way out. We were boxed in. I crept to the connecting door and pushed it open a fraction wider. The light from her bathroom was on, casting a sliver across the bed. Sarah was asleep, curled up on top of the thin bedspread, still in her clothes. She looked like a child, her face peaceful and unguarded for the first time since I'd met her. Waking her up would mean bringing the terror back. I had to handle this. Me. I slipped back into my room and went to the main door. I put my hand on the knob, my mind racing. What was his plan? Go to the office and try to bully the old man for our room number? Or was he more direct? Was he just going to start kicking in doors? The car door opened with a soft click. A man got out. Even in the dim, murky light, I could see his silhouette. He was tall, broad-shouldered. Military posture, ramrod straight. He stood by his car for a long moment, scanning the motel. His head turned, slowly, and then stopped, aimed right at the back of the lot. At my rig. He knew. Then he started walking. Not toward the office. Not toward the rooms. He walked right toward my truck. A cold dread washed over me. What was he doing? Sabotage? Slashing the tires? Disabling the engine? My truck was my life. It was my legs, my home, my shield. Without it, we were stranded, helpless. I had to stop him. I eased my door open a crack, the hinges groaning in protest, and slipped out into the cold night. I moved along the wall of the motel, using the deep shadows, my heavy boots surprisingly silent on the cracked pavement. I'm a big guy, but 20 years of moving around sleeping trucks has taught me how to be quiet. I got to the corner of the building and peered around. He was at the driver's side of my cab. He had a tire iron in his hand. But he wasn't going for the tires. He was at the side of the truck, prying open the fuel cap. My blood ran cold. He was going to contaminate the fuel. Sugar, dirt, water, anything would kill the engine, foul the injectors, and strand me here for days. It was smart. It was tactical. It was an act of war. Rage, pure and simple, boiled up inside me. This wasn't about Sarah anymore. He wasn't just coming after her. He was coming after my livelihood. My life. I stepped out from behind the corner. Get away from my truck, I said. My voice was low and steady, but it carried in the still night air like the crack of a whip. He spun around. He was fast. In the dim light from the distant highway, I saw his face for the first time up close. It was the man from the photograph. Square jaw, short cropped hair. But the polished, confident smile was gone. His eyes were flat, hard, and utterly devoid of emotion. They were the eyes of a shark. "This doesn't concern you, old man," he said, his voice calm, almost pleasant. It was more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. He took a step toward me, hefting the tire iron in his hand. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. "She's my wife. I'm taking her home. You're going to stay out of it." "She doesn't want to go with you," I said, standing my ground. I could feel the scar on my jaw tingling. A phantom memory of old violence. "What she wants is irrelevant," he said, taking another step. He was closer now. I could smell the stale cigarettes on his breath, mixed with something sour. "She's confused. You've been filling her head with nonsense. Now walk away. This is your only warning." I saw the look in his eyes, cold and empty like a winter sky over Wyoming. He wasn't looking at her, she wasn't even there. He was looking right through her memory, at me. And in that second, I knew this wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about property. She was a thing he owned, and I was the thief who had taken her. "The only place you're taking her is to a graveyard," I said, my own voice tight with a fury I hadn't felt in years. "I've seen men like you. You talk about love, but all you know is control." His face tightened. The calm mask cracked. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you put your hands on her," I shot back. "That's all I need to know." For a split second, I saw surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to know that. He hadn't expected her to tell me. Then it was gone, replaced by pure, murderous rage. He lunged. He was fast, I'll give him that. Military training. He swung the tire iron in a vicious, horizontal arc aimed right at my head. I threw myself backward, stumbling over my own feet. The iron whistled past my ear, close enough for me to feel the rush of air. I scrambled back, trying to get my feet under me on the loose gravel. He was on me in a second, his face contorted into a mask of hate. He wasn't trying to scare me. He wasn't trying to disable me. He was trying to kill me. I kicked out, my heavy steel-toed boot connecting solidly with his knee. I heard a satisfying, wet crack and he grunted in pain, his attack faltering for just a second. It was all the opening I needed. I surged to my feet. I'm not a young man anymore, and I'm built for sitting, not for fighting. But I'm 6 feet 2 inches and 250 pounds of stubbornness and stored up anger. He came at me again, favoring his leg, hissing a curse. I didn't try to dodge this time. I charged forward, getting inside the arc of his swing. I slammed my shoulder into his chest, a full body check, driving him backward. We crashed against the cold aluminum side of my trailer with a loud boom that echoed through the silent parking lot. The tire iron clattered to the ground, lost in the darkness. He was strong. Wiry, coiled muscle. He shoved me back, his hands finding my throat. His thumbs pressed down, hard, searching for my windpipe. Black spots danced in my vision. The world narrowed to his hate-filled face, just framed in the yellow doorway, her face a pale oval in the darkness. She was shaking from head to foot, clutching the door frame for support. "Mark," she whispered. His head snapped toward her. The mask of the concerned husband dropped instantly, replaced by a snarl of pure possession. "Get back in the room, Sarah. We're going home." "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it was firm. It was the bravest sound I'd ever heard. He took a step toward her. I said, "Get back in the room. Now." I moved to put myself between them. "You heard her. It's over." He ignored me completely. His eyes, those cold, empty eyes, were locked on her. "Don't make me come and get you, Sarah. You know what happens when you make me angry." And then the second twist came. The one that changed everything. It didn't come from him, or from me. It came from her. "I know you were discharged, Mark," she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I called your CO yesterday. Captain Miller. He was worried when I said you hadn't checked in. He told me everything." Mark froze. The color drained from his face. It was like she'd fired a bullet and it had hit him square in the chest. "He told me it wasn't for a training exercise you were sent to California," she continued, the words coming faster now, a torrent of truth that washed away all his lies. "It was for a mandatory psych evaluation. He told me about the investigation. About the bar fight off base in San Diego. About the recruit you put in the hospital for dropping his rifle. He told me they were giving you a dishonorable discharge. For conduct unbecoming an officer. For uncontrolled aggression. She took a shaky breath, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen before. "You're not a hero, Mark. You're a violent, sick man who was about to be kicked out of the only thing that ever gave you an identity. You lost your career, your honor, everything. And you were coming home to take it out on me. Weren't you?" The silence that followed was absolute, deeper than the Wyoming night. The old man with the shotgun, me, even Mark, we were all frozen, caught in the glare of her terrible, liberating truth. She hadn't just been running from a controlling husband. She'd been running from a trained soldier who had been deemed too unstable and violent even for the army. A man who had just lost everything, who had nothing left to lose. The lie about Afghanistan wasn't just to get away. It was a shield. As long as people thought he was a hero serving overseas, no one would question her leaving. No one would help him look for her. It was the only head start she could think to give herself. Mark's face, which had been a mask of rage, crumpled. It was like watching a building collapse in on itself. All the anger, the pride, the control, it all just fell away, and what was left was something small, and ugly, and pathetic. "Sarah," he whimpered. It was the sound of a boy, not a man. "It's over," she said, and this time, there were no tears. Her voice was cold steel. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not going back." He looked from her defiant face, to my bloody-knuckled one, to the old man holding the shotgun. He saw the truth in our eyes. He was exposed. Defeated. Without another word, he turned, limped back to his blue sedan, got in, and drove away. He didn't even look back. We watched his taillights disappear down the state highway, leaving nothing but dust and a ringing silence. The old man lowered his shotgun. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, and shuffled back to his office, closing the door on a world that was too complicated for 2 in the morning. I walked over to Sarah. She was still standing in the doorway, trembling now that the adrenaline was gone. I put a hand on her shoulder. It was shaking like a leaf. "You did good," I said. It felt like the understatement of the century. She collapsed against me, not in a romantic way, but with the dead weight of pure, soul-deep exhaustion. I held her up, my own body screaming in protest from the fight, my head throbbing. "What now?" she whispered into my jacket. "Now," I said, looking out at the empty highway where a monster used to be. "Now we get you somewhere truly safe." The rest of the drive was different. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was settled, calm. The fight at the motel had broken the fever. We drove north, away from I-80, taking a winding series of state highways through the empty heart of Wyoming and into Idaho. The sun came up, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending.